Today, we are going to discuss about the software testing life cycle. Okay.
Mhm.
So, generally in a testing, we always follow the life cycle. So, whatever the activities which we are doing in our daily life, so we will be having some life cycle. We always follow the life cycle.
Mhm.
So, life cycle is nothing but which we call it as a flow. So, even if you are planning for any of the event, so you will be having the proper plan. So, one and only if you have the proper plan, so the event will be successful. Even if you're planning for a trip, so you will be having the proper plan. We will be booking the flight tickets accordingly, and you will be arranging the stays, food, etc. So we will be having the proper plan, and we will move towards the trip as per the plan which we have made, so that we can make the trip successful. In similar way, right? So whenever we are doing the testing, so we are having some phases, so which we call it as a life cycle. We generally go in this flow, so that at the end, we will be getting the desired output. So we are having the multiple phases, so in which the first phase, we call it as an requirement analysis. Okay, so this is the first phase. So pretty much in the last few sessions, so we are focusing only on the requirement analysis. So generally, right, so the requirement are converted as an user story. Okay, and it will be available in the respective project management tool. So let it be kind of, and it is available in a Jira board. Okay, so how or who will create the requirement in the sense? So the business analyst will sit with the stakeholders, and they will understand their stakeholders need and post the understanding. So they will be creating the requirement, and they will be splitting up the requirement into one user story. So in an agile world, so the requirement is not fixed. So I told the requirement will be keep on changing. So we are going to work in an epic wise. So epic wise in the sense, it will contain multiple user story. So let's say if the Amazon is going to introduce the pay later option, so we can say it is a pay later epic, which means a particular epic can have a multiple user story. And the business analyst will understand the client need, so how their pay later option should behave. So post the understanding, so they will be creating the requirement document, and they will be splitting the requirement document into one multiple user story. And either we will be completing the user story in an single sprint or in an multiple sprint. Okay, so whenever there is an user story, so the user story will contain both functional as well as non-functional requirement. Okay, so the functional requirement in the sense, so we can say how the application should behave. So the working behavior, we call it as an functional requirement. So the non-functional requirement in the sense, so it's mainly deals with the performance and the security. Okay, so basically, so every time, so the requirement will contain both functional requirement as well as the non-functional requirement. As a functional tester, we are going to focus upon the functional requirement. Okay, so who are will be involved in this requirement analysis in the sense, so basically they will be having certain calls. And in a calls, so the as usual, so the scrum master will be available, and post that so the scrum master post that the business analyst will be available, and the dev lead and the QA lead will be available. Okay, so before creating the requirement, okay, which is not before creating the requirement, before finalizing the requirement, so the multiple discussion will be involved between the scrum master, business analyst, and the dev lead and the QA lead. And based upon the input received from each and every person, so the business analyst will finalize the requirement, and which will contain the functional as well as the non-functional requirement. So while finalizing the requirement, so they always do one testing so which we call it as an static testing. Okay, so what is meant by static? So static is nothing but we can say it is like kind of an fits. If the car is parked, we can say the car is in static position. So which means so the requirement will have some fixed set of data, and we will be reviewing the fixed set of data. So why we are reviewing the fixed set of data in the sense? So in order to ensure like the requirement is stable, okay, or else the requirement is clear, or it is the requirement is satisfying the client need. Because one and only if the requirement is clear, the end outcome of the product will be perfect. If there is a lag in a requirement, then for sure the end product will have an multiple defects. So in order to avoid that, so the first phase is going to be an requirement analysis. So they are going to analyze the requirement, and the requirement will have a functional requirement as well as a non-functional requirement. And how they will be analyzed in the sense, so they will be having the multiple calls. There will be 2 and 4 discussion between the scrum master, business analyst, and the dev lead and QA lead. And apart from that, like the QA lead or the senior QA person will do the static testing. So static testing is nothing but so just they are analyzing the user story. Okay, so once they are confirmed, once they are okay with the requirement, okay, so then they will be moving to the second phase called as an test plan. Okay, so but in an agile, so generally like we won't create the test plan, but as part of an STLC, the test plan is the one of the phase, so which we followed yearly. But nowadays the few projects are following the test plan creation, but the multiple agile project won't create the test plan. So the reason is like because the requirement is keep changing. So that is the advantage of an agile. As the requirement is keep changing, we can't derive the end-to-end test plan. But I will explain like what is mean by test plan as well. So generally this test plan is created by either the test manager or by the so test lead. So generally like why they are creating the test plan in the sense, so simple, so to estimate the effort. Okay, so what is the effort required to complete that particular requirement? So or else let's say like they have finalized one epic. So then in order to complete that one particular epic, so how much time frame which we required? Or in other language we can say, so like we are going to derive the process. So what we are going to do? So like the HSAT process, what are the HSAT process involved, and what are the different types of testing we are going to do? So which means we are going to derive the HSAT process. The HSAT process is nothing but like we are going to finalize like how the so testing needs to be done. Okay, so like for example, like what are the HSAT process which you are going to derive in the sense, like we can say like what are the types of testing which we are going to perform, or what are the testing tools which we are going to use, and like what are the roles and responsibilities of each and every members. So likewise they will draft the plan, and post drafting the plan, so they will be sharing the plan to the scrum master, or else like they will be sharing the plan to the stakeholders. And once they are okay with the plan, so then actual testing will starts. Okay, so basically like we are going to draft the plan, and the plan will be drafted by the test manager or the test lead. So basically like we are going to estimate the effort, which is nothing but we are going to derive the HSAT process, how the testing needs to be done. So in which like we will be including what are the different types of testing we are going to perform, or what are the different types of testing tool we are going to use, and the roles and responsibilities, and in case if any training is needed, so like what are the respective training is needed. So what are the things which is required to complete the testing. So we will be draft everything as a plan, and we will be sharing the plan to the scrum masters or the stakeholders, and it is kind of a document. Okay, so while creating the test plan, so we will be creating one more document, so which we call it as a test strategy. Okay, so basically this test strategy is used for an internal reference. So we are not going to share to anyone. It is basically used for the internal reference. So it is basically used for the internal reference. So the internal reference in the sense, like within a testing team, we are going to use it. So basically it contains two things. So one is of an test schedule, okay, and other is like kind of an resource planning. Okay, so the test schedule in the sense, like we will be highlighting few points. So few points like, so what is the scope of the project? So the scope and overview of the project. Okay, so and then like we will be mentioning about the test approach. So the test approach in the sense whether we are going to follow the waterfall model or the agile model, and what are the tools which we are going to use, and basically like, so they will be doing the risk analysis. Okay, so the risk analysis is nothing but like based upon the prior experience. So the managers or the test lead will discuss with the multiple teams and whatever the challenges they have faced in the other project. So they will list down all the challenges, so that like if the same problem arises in our project, rather than wasting the time in analysis, so we can use the same solution. So that is why like they always do the risk analysis. Okay, and they will be mentioning all the risk analysis in the strategy document, and finally like they will be mentioning so who is going to review and approve our work. Okay, so even if you are doing the test design, so who is going to review and approve, and post completing our testing activities, who is going to review and approve. So those things will be mentioned in the test strategy. So the test strategy will contains two things. One is of a test schedule and another is of an resource planning. So the test schedule indicates the overview of the project, the test approach, the test tool, or even they will be mentioning about the testing environment. So I will explain like what is meant by test environment next, etc. And apart from that, like we will be discussing about the resource planning. So resource planning in the sense, in a test plan, so they will be mentioning like they will be required 5 QA, but in the strategy document, so they will be having the detailed description. So when they are going to onboard the particular resource, so for example, if it is a sprint one, right, so the developer load will be heavy. So which means like the testing phase is like bit low. So we don't need a 5 QA. So initially they will go with the 1 QA. So when the sprint keep on grows, okay, so then we will be having the stable application. So then they will be onboard the other QA. So like in the sprint 2, they may add hire one more QA, and in the sprint 3, so now the application is stable enough. So then they will be onboarding the automation test engineers as well. So likewise, so when in which sprint, so they are going to onboard each and every resources. So those things will be mentioned in the test strategy document, and we are going to use this test strategy document so only for the internal reference. So once the plan is confirmed, so then what happened? Obviously, like the sprint starts. Okay, so once the sprint starts, so the developer is going to do the development activities, and as a QA, like we are going to do the test design. Okay, so the phase 3 is going to be an test design. Okay, so the test design is nothing but I have explained. So the process of deriving all possible scenarios, we call it as an test design. So we are going to derive all possible scenarios. So like while deriving the all possible scenarios, so either like we may derive in the Excel sheet, or we may use the BDT approach, so which we are going to discuss in the further session. Okay, so like we are going to do the test design. Okay, and after completing the test design, so we should always get the review and approval from the business analyst or from the test lead. Okay, so after completing the test design, so we should get an review on approval. So it will be reviewed either by the business analyst or by the test lead. So why they are reviewing the test design in the sense, so just to ensure like whether you have covered all possible scenarios. So if you have missed any scenarios, then either the business analyst or the test lead will provide a suggestion. They will ask us to add that particular scenario, so that like we will be having the better coverage. Okay, because like whenever we are going to test something, so we need to cover all possible scenarios. Okay, so that is why like while doing the test design, so we should include all possible scenarios, and we need to get a review and approval from the business analyst or the test lead. Okay, so now assume that the developer has completed the development activities. So whenever they complete the development activities, so they will hand over the code to the QA team. So how they will hand over the code in the sense, so basically they will deploy the code. So deploy in the sense the process of hosting the code in the URL is called as a deployment, and technically we call the URL as an environment, and they are going to host the code in the test environment. So the phase 4 is going to be an test environment setup. Okay, so in a real time, right, so like we won't host the code directly in the live environment. Okay, so why we are not hosting the code in live environment in the sense, because if something went wrong, then it is going to last to the business. So assume that like if the Instagram is down for 1 hour, so like they are getting the loss in millions of ways. So in similar way, like if you do something in the live environment, if some unexpected failure occurs, so it is going to create the loss for the client. And how they are going to avoid the loss in the sense, so whenever they are developing the new feature, so the new feature will be deployed in the, like we will be having the multiple test environment, so which we are going to discuss in the further session. So like we will be having the low level to high level environment. So the environment will start from the sys environment, sit environment, then UAT environment, then finally to the prod, which is nothing but live environment. So the developer won't directly host the code in the live. Before that, they will be hosting any of the environment. So once they complete the development activities, they will tell us. So they will inform the QA team. So the particular user story is available in this particular environment, then we can start the testing. Okay, so once we get to know the environment, so the next thing is like we need to start the execution. So the phase 5 is going to be like kind of an so text execution. And how we are going to execute in the sense, so only based upon the approved test design. Okay, based on the approved test design. Okay, so we have derived all possible scenarios. So we need to check each and every scenario one by one to ensure like whether it is working as expected. Okay, so like if it is working as expected, so then we need to capture the test evidence. Okay, and test evidence in the sense we need to capture the screenshot, and then we need to attach the screenshot in the respective user story. And finally the final phase, which we call it as a test closer. Okay, so the phase 6 is going to be of an test closer. Okay, so the test closer is nothing but, so once we completed the testing activity, if you are good with this, So like if there is no failure, if everything is working as expected, then you can close the user story. Okay, so before completion of the sprint, so we should ensure like we are closing each and every user story. So generally, right, so we will always have the user story. So initially the user story will be in the new status. So once it is new, so the developer will analyze. So the one during the analysis, so they will be having the status as a dev analysis. And once they complete the analysis, and if they start with the development activities, so they will change the status to the in development. And once they complete the development activities and they deploy the code in any of the test environment, so then they will be changing the status to ready for QA. And once it is ready for QA, so we should do the testing activity. So while doing the testing activity, so the status of the user story will be like moved to in testing. So where we are going to do the testing activities. So when they change the status for the ready for QA in the comment section, so they will be adding the test environment. So which environment, so the code is deployed, and in that particular environment we are going to do the test design. And if you are okay with the testing, if everything is working as expected, then we are moving to the test closer, which is nothing but, so we should move the status to the ready for acceptance. Okay, so once we move the status to the ready for acceptance, then what happened? So once we move to the ready for acceptance, so then what happened? So then it will be reviewed by the business analyst, and once they are okay with the test evidence, they will accept the user story. Okay, before end of the sprint, so all the user story should be accepted. Okay, so this is the flow which we are going to follow. So like we always follow the life cycle. So why we are following the life cycle in a sense, so that like we will be having the proper plan. Okay, so like even like in our day-to-day activities, so we always have certain plan. So one and only if you walk towards the plan, so the desired result will be perfect. So in the similar way, like in a testing, so we are going to follow the life cycle called as an STLC. So in similar to that, the developer will follow some life cycle which they called as an SDLC, so software development life cycle. So we don't need to worry about the software development life cycle, or else like if time permits, like at the end of the training, like let me try to explain the software development life cycle as well. Okay, so now what are the things which I have explained? So it will be available in the Jira board. So you can just navigate to the Jira board and you can access the software testing life cycle. So what are the things which I have explained? So everything will be available over here. So just you can read it and you can understand better. Okay, so starting from the requirement analysis and how we are going to create the test plan, and what are the test strategy document will contain, and then like what is meant by test execution, what is meant by test environment setups, and how we are going to close the test case. So everything will be available. So you can just go and read it up for the better understanding.